Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. Vladimir Putin was guest of honor among more than 130 global representatives in Beijing as Xi Jinping marked 10 years of his Belt and Road Initiative, a program of infrastructure projects and investment which spreads Chinese influence across the globe. With me to discuss this are Chenlung Kuo, United Daily News Deputy Editor-in-Chief, and Yanping Su, National Chengchi University Department of Political Science Professor. Chenlung and Professor, very warm welcome to the show today. It was Russian President Vladimir Putin's first visit to a major power since his arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court for atrocities in Ukraine. The third summit for the Belt and Road Initiative in Beijing was Putin's chance to reclaim the world stage, show he is not isolated, and cement his relationship with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Xi had strong messages for the United States, though Washington was not named. Watch this.
把别人的发展视为威胁，把经济相互依存视为风险，不会让自己生活得更好，发展得更快。不搞意识形态对立，不搞地缘政治博弈，也不搞集团政治对抗，反对单边制裁。 反对经济胁迫，也反对脱钩断链。
Chenlung, so those comments obviously directed at US's trade restrictions and also the West de-risking. Now, he gave the world stage to Vladimir Putin, his friend, and Putin, in his speech, he talked about the common threats that brought their two countries, China and Russia, together. How aligned are they, and what did this event mean? What was the significance for these two leaders?
I think Putin had a change of attitude toward Belt and Road Initiative. At first, Russia is kind of hesitate to attend because all those big investments China had been making in Central Asia is actually contradict with Russia's influence in a sense. But now, this time, I think Putin is embraced wholeheartedly after 10 years of China's Belt and Road Initiative. This had got a lot to do with the war in Ukraine. I think now Russia is more dependent on China than ever. And I think by showing, having this visit to China after Russia made the invasion in Ukraine, this had solidified its relations with China. And now with the crisis in Middle East, now people are talking about the evil axis that include China, Russia, Iran, and that also include North Korea. I think that is the bounding and the trend that everyone is looking at.
So, Professor Su, picking up on that, was this event significant because it's basically, the furtherment of a different world order, perhaps a Chinese-led world order?
Yes, I believe so. Well, before this forum, we can notice that in August, also this year, there was a summit, a BRICS summit. So in that summit, China has already made an image to the world that this country is going to be a leader in the global south. So like 2 months after, so in this forum, this event reaffirmed that China is building that kind of image in a very positive way. And of course, the world changed a lot, and there are a lot of different events. And so we had witnessed the Israeli-Palestinian war, and also the war between Ukraine and Russia still continues. So these kind of different events actually created a sort of better opportunity for China to better position itself as a kind of leader in the global south.
So kind of as a counterbalance to the US, Chenlung.
Yes, and I think what your clip had just showed is that the two things that China emphasized a lot. One is that shouldn't treat others' development as a threat, meaning that China's rise have the right of itself, that the West should not see China's rise as a threat. The other would be could not taking economic interdependence as a risk, meaning that the West had been losing interest to invest in the developing countries for a long time. And China take the opportunity and having this huge project of Belt and Road Initiative exactly is try to reverse that kind of trend. And then China is willing to take the risk. China is willing to show the responsibility. And that had proven China is the rightful rise in this global stage, I think. Right?
Professor Su, Chenlung mentioned earlier that Russia wasn't on board with Belt and Road initially, but now there has been a shift. Tell us a bit about the Northwest Passage and the role that Putin and obviously he's discussed it with Xi Jinping, can play in the Belt and Road. I'll just quote to you what he said in his speech at the conference. He's talking about the potential to link transport corridors from north to south in the European part of Russia, in Siberia, in the Far East, open up the opportunity to directly connect the Northern Sea route with large logistics hubs in the south of our continent on the coast to the coast of the Indian and Pacific Oceans.
Yeah. Well, as Dr. Kuo just mentioned, Russia is actually right now more dependent on China than the other way around. Well, if we talk about the real purpose of building this Belt and Road diplomacy, well, the standard answer, most common answer is that China tried very hard to export its domestic production over capacity, right? And but there is another goal that cannot be ignored, which is China is trying to ensure stable supply of energy from other countries like Russia. So basically, right now the situation in Russia really that provided a very good opportunity for China to build, to ensure that kind of stable supply. I mean, previously, maybe Russia still has some negotiation power, right? But right now, China is actually the one that can that have greater negotiation power in this relationship.
Let me add to Professor Su had just said. If you look at the map and you look at the globe from the top, you will see that actually if the ships can sail through the North Pole or in the Arctic Circle, that will make China have another access directly to Russia. Instead, you have to go through continental Europe all the way from Central Asia to Russia by rail or by highway. You can have a direct ship line going over to Russia. I think what Putin has suggested is that we are providing, with the global warming, that now the ice in the Arctic has melting, and we are providing easy access for all the countries in the Pacific and in the ocean, that we can reach Russia in a more quicker way. It used to be that Russia is offering that to European countries, but now with the sanction law, that instead he's offering to Russia, to China right now.
So we're really seeing this deepening of cooperation between these two powers. Okay, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it's been clear the international order has been changing. Zack Cooper, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, has identified 3 specific shifts. He tells me the new Cold War that Beijing warns Washington against is simply off the mark. Take a look.
What the United States is doing is building multiple different coalitions in various areas, and around security, around economic issues, around technology issues, around global governance issues. And this doesn't look anything like the Cold War. My favorite example of this is that Beijing complained of a Cold War mentality when the United States reached out to sign this new comprehensive strategic partnership with Vietnam. And I certainly don't remember the United States and Vietnam having some sort of Cold War partnership like this. So I think what you're really hearing from Beijing is a desire to undermine US alliances and partnerships.
You have actually identified why this is happening, the building of coalitions, according to three world shifts.
The first shift is a shift from unipolarity to multipolarity, which really means that we're seeing a shift from having one major leading power, the United States, to having multiple leading powers. And I think that includes the United States and China and Japan, the European Union, and others. The second shift is a shift from alliances to alignments, which really means that it's not like the Cold War was. We're not going to have one dominant alliance system in Asia. We're going to have multiple overlapping alignments on different issue sets. And then the third shift is from multinational groupings, big, large groupings like the World Trade Organization, to much smaller minilateral groupings of 3, 4, 5 countries. And I think we're seeing that with the US, Japan, Korea trilateral arrangement, the Chip 4 grouping with Taiwan, the United States, Japan, Korea, and many others.
Is it simplistic to say that there are winners and losers in this new era?
There are definitely winners and losers, and I think some Americans would like to be in a unipolar world. And they'll point out that if you go back and look in the last couple of decades, US gross domestic product has stayed pretty steady as a percentage of world production. So something like 24, 25% global production is still in the United States, and that was true 30 years ago. The reality, of course, is that numbers declined significantly from, say, 1946, when the US was almost half of global production. But this doesn't mean that the US is in decline. It really means that we're seeing Asia rise relative to Europe in particular. And for the United States, I don't think this is a bad thing at all.
Let's talk about Russia and China specifically, because the coalitions that you've mentioned have appeared to be US involved or US led.
So it's clear that Russia and China are building their own smaller coalitions in different areas. So Russia and China have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Russia has the CSTO grouping. China brings together a lot of countries through its Belt and Road Initiative. But none of these groupings look as coherent as some of the American groupings. Russia and China have what's now an expanding BRICS organization, which includes a whole bunch of countries that have, frankly, very little in common. So it's not just Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Increasingly, it's going to include Iran, Egypt. This is going to be a really difficult set of countries to manage. And so I think what's critical in thinking about coalitions going forward is whether they have a clear objective and whether the countries that are part of those coalitions actually share that objective.
Would you call China's Belt and Road Initiative a kind of coalition itself?
I think the Chinese definitely want it to be the genesis of a large coalition, but I'm not sure that it's that coherent, right? I think what it really is a lot of countries that want to get infrastructure and other funding from China. It's not so much a set of countries that have a shared common interest and objective.
And you mentioned the shift, one of the shifts being from multilateralism to minilateralism. For Taiwan, which is locked out of the United Nations system, does this present an opportunity in the new era?
I think it does. And I think Taiwan should really embrace this new concept of minilateralism. The best example for me is Taiwan's participation in the Chip 4 grouping with Japan and Korea and the United States. This is the kind of issue-specific group that Taiwan is absolutely central to, and where I think it can do a lot of good.
That was Asian security analyst Zack Cooper speaking to me earlier. Now, let's take a look at a map of the Belt and Road Initiative. Since Xi Jinping first proposed the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, China has stretched its so-called infrastructure belt, the white lines, westward, thousands of kilometers through Asia, Russia, and Africa. Another maritime belt in blue dots of ports and bases links the Pacific Islands, the South China Sea, the Indian Ocean, Suez Canal, Mediterranean, and even the North Sea. China says more than 150 countries and over 30 international organizations have signed up to the program. Chenlung, if I could ask you, so in Xi's speech, he says, I quote, Belt and Road cooperation is on the right side of history. It represents the advancing of our times, and it is the right path forward. So on the 10th anniversary, what's your analysis of this initiative, and is it, in Xi's words, the project of the century?
I'd like to pick up what Professor Su had just mentioned, that the whole Belt and Road Initiative is actually consequences of a bad policy. It all started in 2009 when there's a financial crisis, and China, the prime minister at the time, Wen Jiabao, had put in 4 trillion renminbi in order to boost up the economy. But later on, they find there's an excess of steel and cement and all the excess productivity. They have to find a way to export. So they come up with the idea to export it to other countries. And that started the Belt and Road. But the Belt and Road is something that is not well thought of at the beginning. So in terms of financial backing, in terms of if there's a debt trap, and what will happen if the countries refuse to pay off, those are the things that is coming to surface. Now China is finding it very difficult. So starting from 2 years ago, Xi Jinping started to talk about small and beautiful project that is easy to manage, and it's not only going to be on the state enterprise, now it's the private enterprise is going to step in. So I think that the Belt and Road is still going to continue in the next 10 years, but it's going to be 2.0. It's going to be a smaller scale, and they will have to find their solution as they go along the way.
Professor Su, so as Chenlung rightly mentioned, you talked about Belt and Road as being essentially new markets for Chinese companies, and also I think you also mentioned that it was to secure resources, important and critical resources like raw materials. Let's move away now from the economic side. Do you see Belt and Road as being a foreign policy tool for China to exert its influence over the world?
Probably that is a very good byproduct of this Belt and Road Initiative. Well, it serves 2 purposes. The first one is that China tried very hard to use this diplomacy tool to project itself to be a world leader in the global south, and also the other purpose is for the so-called internal propaganda, which can help China, the Chinese Communist Party, to maintain its ruling legitimacy. Some analysts have mentioned that, of course, this policy brought up some negative outcomes. For example, the so-called debt trap. I'm not sure whether it is a sort of exaggerated narrative. Maybe the concept of debt trap is true, but it was like several years ago, maybe 5 years ago. But right now, we can observe that the Chinese government is making less investment for the BRI diplomacy. So compared to 2006, where the investment of BRI was up to almost like 90 billion in 2021, of course, due to the impacts of COVID-19, etc., the overall investment was estimated as only 5 billion. Okay, so it's a very big contrast.
And if we look at the other end of that, we can see, in fact, as the investments dropped off, or maybe it's the other way around, the debts have ballooned, isn't it? So I just wanted to quote some figures from Rhodium Group between 2020 and 2022. $76.8 billion of Chinese overseas loans were renegotiated or written off. And this compares to just 17 billion in the preceding 3 years. So probably this is what triggers the drop in investment. So Chenlung, for you then, Professor Su has said it's not clear, whether we can call this a debt trap. This is what Xi Jinping says. He says that this is win-win cooperation, and the flame runs higher when everyone adds wood. what is the true picture? There are some benefits to developing countries who needed infrastructure and now have got the infrastructure. Is that true?
I think that a lot of the recipient is actually is working under, we used to call it unequal treaty, meaning that once they are overburdened by the debt, they'll have to turn over the operation to Chinese, and the Chinese authority would take over the infrastructures, and for several years, maybe decades, until they can really pay off. And I think that arrangement have been criticized a lot by the West. But I think for the first 10 years of Belt and Road Initiative, it's unfortunate, probably they have bad luck. They run into COVID. So there's a huge amount of economic recessions. The Chinese authority are thinking that the next 10 years will be better. And I think for another purpose, they want to bury the cost in some of the new policy they want to promote. For instance, they are very concerned about the energy transportation they are getting from the Middle East. So they set up several ports, and it's called a string of pearl along the Pacific and Indian Oceans. That would help them to guarantee the safety of this kind of transportation. That is also the cost of this kind of energy security. And the other thing is, China have been worrying about the terrorism brewing over Central Asia. Now with a huge amount of investment over Central Asia, they are hoping this kind of bondage will help them win the support of the Central Asia government to crash all those terrorism.
Yeah, especially you're talking about because of unrest in Xinjiang and Tibet.
And one of the countries especially is Afghanistan. And I noticed that Taliban had sent in their representative this time in the Belt and Road Summit.
They wish to join too.
Right. I think that is also Chinese purpose of doing it.
Right, okay. Professor Su, talking about Central Asia, Xi Jinping has said, repeated at the summit, that it was the Silk Road that inspired the Belt and Road. And of course, this is the ancient road linking China to the West. What do you think the Silk Road means to Xi Jinping beyond trade and investment?
Well, the main primary goal will be, of course, for Xi Jinping to build up more influence in the international community, and to sort of build in a kind of dominant discourse especially in the area of international development. Yeah. So and one trend that we cannot ignore is that China is actually has been trying to diversify its this kind of diplomatic tool. We can notice that in 2021, the Chinese government pushed forward in the UN meeting, pushed forward a kind of a new initiative called Global Development Initiative, which will make 10 billion US dollars to actually for as a foreign aid to other developing countries. So basically, this GDI will be, well, it's still not clear whether global development initiative could be successful, but it actually tried very hard to sort of reduce the possible negative impacts of the BRI. So both policy play very different roles, and China has been pretty smart to play this kind of different policy and to make sure that its ambition will not be too threatening for so many countries.
Yes, and picking up on the fact that China does react, it does respond to feedback, to criticism. Tonglun, tell us about Belt and Road in English is actually not the name in Chinese, and why was the change?
In Chinese, it's 一带一路, One Belt, One Road. But that sounds too hegemon for a lot of countries, because it all lead to China, or China project the image of a road and belt. So they change into Belt and Road Initiative, which is more neutral. Now they are thinking about changing into Belt and Road Cooperation. And that is less condescending, and then it's more more acceptable for other countries. But I will have to add that the best compliment is coming from imitation. I think that now the G7 countries, as well as the G20 summit we just had, they are also developing a similar kind of big multilateral project, just like Belt and Road.
Right.
I think
because they have to respond, they have to rival.
Right. I think the West has now realized that this is very attractive for the global South countries. They are following what China had been doing.
And finally, Professor Su, she said that $1 trillion has been invested into Belt and Road, and you mentioned that there were two purposes for this program. One of them was this. The domestic demand for legitimacy. But with the economic problems at home in China, which is beset by these various demographic economic problems right now, is this investment still worth it for Xi Jinping?
Well, it's my guess that maybe building this kind of stronger image through more investment via BRI is worth it at least to, or it can help stabilize their internal politics and also again strengthen the ruling legitimacy.
And perhaps an investment in a new world order. We're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Chenlung Kuo and Xu Jinping. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.